guess I have to use this recording. I don't know for who. All righty. Yeah. Well, we left off chapter 5. A little go over. We went through the 7 churches, and chapter 4 was pretty amazing. Just kind of the throne room of God. Test. Yeah. Yeah, it's on. There's only 3 of us. Okay. Yeah. And again, so he got to see the majesty of the Lord. He saw the throne room, the lightnings, the thunders, the 24 elders, which we all kind of described, holy, 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 just as you just can't get any holier than the third holy, right? And even though we got into chapter 5, but I'll just kind of read through where we left off there, and we'll go through that. We'll go through, we should be able to get through that, and then before we get into chapter 6, we'll back a little bit and say, well, why do we think we're at end times? What's going on that we think we're getting closer? Just a few main points on that. Just the situation in the world, what's going on. Prophecy that was fulfilled in order for this to take place. Just a few of the major ones, and then we'll dive into. And again, 6, if you haven't read for a while, it starts getting where the rubber meets the road. It starts getting, you're going to see God's judgment. When God's judgment comes, he doesn't waste any time, and it's just, like I say, sometimes as a human we look at it and go, how can this happen? But as God, he's withheld his wrath for 6,000 years, He says he's going to bring it to a close, the millennial reign, and then from there on. But so, and he's given all of us more warnings, the love of Christ to come to him, and even during that 7 years, people are still going to be coming to Christ, even through the millennial reign. It's going to be a theocracy, but even at the end, and I think that question was raised last week, and as we get there, well, why would God let Satan out? But that's a little ways down the road, but so we'll start with chapter 5. And it says, Then I saw in his right hand to him who sat on the throne a scroll with writing on it on both sides and sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming in a loud voice, Who is worthy to break the seals and open the scroll? But no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth could open the scroll or even look inside it. I wept and wept because no one was found who was worthy to open the scroll and look inside. Then one of the elders said to me, Do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has triumphed. He is able to open the scroll and its 7 seals. And again, I'm reading from the NIV, so New International Version. So yours will say similar words, etc. Probably most people are using the New King James Version, I imagine. So again, as we saw that, so God's sitting in the throne. There's the scrolls. No one's worthy to open it because there's only one person, God, the God-man, that's able to open that scroll, that lived the life of a human, that was able to resist the temptations through the power of the Holy Spirit, conquered death and conquered Satan through the death on the cross, the resurrection, and he's the only one. So again, John's weeping, just the magnitude that nobody can open the scrolls. Even though, again, John doesn't know what's in the scrolls, probably has no idea right now, but then he says, the Lion, the tribe of Judah, and we all know that Jesus came from the tribe of Judah. The lion, he's noted for the lion, especially as the second time he comes. And again, the root of David, he was one of David's offsprings from generations through Jesse, through Rahab, right? Rahab from, remember the walls of Jericho? Right, descended right on through there. Then I saw a lamb looking as if it had been slain, standing in the center of the throne, encircled by the 4 creatures and elders. He had 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. He came and took the scroll from the right hand of him who sat on the throne. And when he had taken it, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb. Each one had a harp, and they were holding golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And they sang a new song. So again, we looked at then I saw the Lamb that was slain. Of course, evidently he could identify Christ because he was with them, right? Maybe he saw the hands pierced. So he knew who it was. And of course, the 4 living creatures we described again, the 6 wings, eyes all around, mighty creatures, cherubim, one protecting the throne, and again, also they see everything. They're looking around. Just powerful, powerful creatures that God created. So again, the 7 horns and the 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits. Again, as we looked at 7 horns, horn is a power back in those days. Horn was depicted as power, and seven horns is again the fullness of the Godhead, the power of God. The 7 spirits, again, speaking of the Holy Spirit. 7 is completion. Anytime you see the 7, it's completion, and the 7 is just name. As we go through 11 or Revelation, you're going to see 7 come up again and again and again and again. So I guess if you're a quarterback, you'd probably want to be the number 7, right? John Elway. So the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth, so he's seen everything that's going on. So Christ comes and takes the scroll from the right hand of him who sat on the throne. So from God the Father to God the Son, he's the only one worthy to open the scrolls. And when he's taken it, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fall down before the Lamb. So again, that's more of a part of worship. Again, they prostrate themselves, whether they're on their knees, on the floor. Again, they realize the significance of what's going on. They were holding the 7 bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And remember, if you remember the tabernacle, they would always burn incense continually, right? And that incense was supposed to drift into the Holy of Holies and represent, the prayers. And you remember when Zacharias went in there, right? From when he went in there, that was not Mary's, but Elizabeth's husband, right? And he goes in there. They have to keep that going 24/7. So when he has his vision, the angel comes in. That's exactly what Zacharias is doing at that point. So it's a great honor for anybody that was part of the Levitical priesthood. So he comes in there. Now this is kind of funny to me. Each one had a harp, and they were holding the 7 golden bowls. So does that mean that maybe as we all get in there, we're all going to have, as we worship Lord Father, that he's going to give us more ability to play any musical instruments? You know, the harp's a beautiful instrument, especially the big one. But so they're all able to play. So hopefully the fullness that we reach, we will have that ability, hopefully to play better guitar. People just to know instinctively how to play and worship the Lord. And they sang a new song. It says, "You are worthy to take the scroll and to open the seals, because you were slain, and with your blood you purchased men for God, for every tribe and language and people and nation." You have made them to be a kingdom and priests to serve our God, and they will reign on earth. So that's pretty interesting. I want you to kind of go down again. They're re-emphasizing the blood that purchased us, right? But look where he goes with, again, every tribe and language and people and nation. So, do you hear him or on that? When he says that, is there anything missing on what he's saying in there? On every tribe and language and people and nation. And I think it's left for a purpose. He's describing all the peoples of the earth, right? And what does he leave out? Races, right? Again, it's a huge tool of Satan. I can't emphasize that much. Even some of the stuff I say, and some, I'm kind of going off this one book by this gentleman, but he says that all the races of the earth, no. We have to stop playing into Satan's hands. We are one race, and we are every tongue, every ethnicity, but we are not different races, and that's what Satan uses to divide us. You know, we all came from the again from the 8 on the boat, right? We're one of their descendants through Adam, all of us, and and he uses it so effectively. And you see in the current situation that we have in America right now, they say I'm an African American, or but again, and that shouldn't be, because that tends to divide, and that's what Satan wants. My race, your race, we're all God's race, and that's it. He created us all one race. And I think a long time ago I gave a little presentation on a Sunday about exactly the scientific evidence that says we're one race. And so when people say races, and you need to steer them a different direction, ethnic group, something like that. Because again, Satan, the only one that wins when we divide races is Satan. He says, you have made them to be a kingdom and priests to serve our God, and they will reign on the earth. So again, he's talking to the church age. He's talking to the believers, the people that have been saved by the blood of the Lamb. Again, that we are going to reign with the Lord. And not only during the millennial reign, but after that. And got to remember, the millennial reign's got 1,000 years, guys. So he's going to need a lot of help, right? So that's why he has the saints ready to go, right? So it says, then I looked and I heard a voice of many angels, numbering thousands upon thousands and 10,000s times 10,000. They encircled the throne and the living creatures and the elders. In a loud voice they sang, worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Yeah, we do that song. Well, at least we have a chorus on that. Worthy who the Lamb was slain. To receive power and wealth and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and praise. So again, we're looking at the just the myriad. We don't know how many angels are in all, but if you just go 10,000 times 10,000, let's see, that's 6 zeros, right? 10 million or 100 million, one of the two. And then there's a voice of many angels numbering. So we know there's a lot of angels, which also means there's a lot of fallen angels. And you remember when Christ was born, right? And they're by Bethlehem, and he comes to the shepherds, and then that same thing, those glory, all of a sudden the angels are there, you know, giving Christ the praise right there. So there's lots of angels. So we do have guardian angels, and that's pretty cool. I always keep them in your prayers and say thanks for guarding me. Then I heard every creature on heaven and earth and under the sea, under the earth and on the sea and all that is in them, singing to him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be praise and honor, glory and power, forever and ever. The four creatures said, which are the four cherubim, the guardian, Amen, and the elders fell down and worshipped again. So again, they're just giving the Lord, and I have a song at home, actually from Pastor Scott. I remember it's just a little short song. To him who sits on the throne, be praise and glory. It's kind of a cool little song. But again, so again, when we get to heaven, there's going to be a lot of worship, but it's going to be authentic. You know, again, we talked about it. Sometimes our heart is into our worship. We're dealing with other issues. This, we're going to be able to focus our whole mind, body, and soul on worshiping our Creator. So that about ends it with 6. Any questions on that? Or 5, I'm sorry. Any questions? All righty. With that being said, 6 starts into some pretty heavy duty. So what's going on between? So John's up there in Revelation. The rapture of the church has taken place, and there's 3 different views of the rapture. All right, most Bible-believing Christians it's the pre-tribulation, and that we are raptured before the final 7 years. Okay, now in Daniel kind of lays the groundwork for the last basically 483 years, and then the last 7 years, which are delayed. So I think it's from the time that they start rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem, the first 483 years take place up to that time. And then the last 7 years, then Daniel really starts getting in about the rise of the Christ, or rise of the Antichrist coming out of the sea, right? This kind of signals that last 7 years. So it's separated from those 490 years that Daniel describes. There's the 483, and then there's a pause in that portion of it as, you know, history continues to roll on. And so at that time, he describes the Antichrist coming out, what's going to happen, the abomination of desolation. Now, there was an abomination of desolation once, alrighty? And he's talking about that in that original one. There was a Roman emperor, his name was Antiochus Epiphanes. And what he actually did is they conquered Jerusalem, and he went up and he set up false worship in the temple. He slaughtered a pig, right? And that's why it's called the abomination of desolation. But that was a foreshadowing to what's going to happen again. Every time you see something in the Bible that talks of something that happened, there's usually a precursor to something that's going to happen in the future. So Daniel's what he's starting to do is he broke out the main theme on what was going to happen the last 7 years before the millennial reign. And then Christ in Matthew 24, and you're going to see some similarities. You might want to read Matthew 24. Remember, after they leave the temple area, and the disciples are gawking at all the magnificent structure, you know, that the temple's there in its full glory. You know, Herod the king he was an Edomite, right? He wasn't Jewish. He was an Edomite, but he had rebuilt the temple, trying to get, you know, favor for the Jews. It took 40 some odd years to do the reconstruction from the second time that they built it. But he finished it. Was it Nehemiah? Remember, they started the reconstruction, but it wasn't very good, right? So Herod the Great finished that. So they're walking out, and then Christ tells them right there, there's going to be a day when not one stone will be unturned in this temple. Now, he's talking about what's going to happen in 70 AD, okay? And they sit down when they got a private moment, and they start talking to Jesus about, did we hear you right? You said something's not going to be, this thing's not going to be standing. And he tells them. And then he goes into his little, it's called the Olivet Discourse, where this is what's going to happen as you start seeing the end times. There's going to be famines and earthquakes, nations rising against nations, kingdoms rising against kingdoms. So that does happen again in 70 AD. The general Titus from the Romans, he comes, they lay siege to the city of Jerusalem in 70 AD. It's like a 2-year siege. And they finally crush the rebellion. They actually go in there, they take the temple, and they strip down the temple stone by stone by stone. And because they are also trying to get to some of the gold, they were saying some of the gold had bled in between the massive blocks and stuff. So they take that entire temple, they dismantle the temple, and that's where it is. But again, that's a precursor to what's going to happen again. So you might be wondering, well, why do scholars think that we're in end times now? I mean, again, 1900 years has passed. We've had the destruction of the temple. The Jews are scattered all over the earth because at that time they're gone. They have to leave the land because the Romans just disband the. So they're scattered over the four corners of over the world right now, and so at that point you're going, well, okay. So let's look back into history, or back into history forward. The Bible talks about that. At the end times, that because they didn't have Jerusalem at that time, okay, it's gone. They lost it in the Babylonian captivity, right? They get it back, boom, it's destroyed again. They're dispersed over the four corners. So the Jewish people are not in Israel anymore. Now there might be remnant farmers and stuff like that, but the people that they're just gone. And you can see it actually through the earth. You know, we got a lot of Jewish people in the United States. We've got Jewish people in Spain, all over Europe. But so things start to happen. So, and because it took so long, what happened is there are a lot of scholars that said, well, this is never going to happen. The stuff that Revelation talks about must have happened earlier. So you have a lot of scholars and Christian groups, and some of them were Catholic maybe, they were saying this can't happen, and that's why you have what's called replacement theology, and that came, I think, from who was it? Not Augustus. Gosh, I can't call his name, but they basically say that the church replaced the Jewish people as God's people. Okay, and even though we are now grafted in, end time still deals with the Jewish people, okay? Thank the Lord that he's grafted us in and made us part of his kingdom, right? But in times for this to happen, there's some major things that have to happen and have already happened. One was in 1917, the Jews did not have Jerusalem at all. Right? It was a Muslim stronghold, and it wasn't their city. There was a British general, because at that point they were kind of, those provinces, those areas were in control of the British Empire, right? And you had the Muslim people inside and controlling Jerusalem, right? So it's fascinating. In 1917, there's a British general, General Allenby, right? And he had read scripture and stuff, right? And this guy he knew Bible prophecy, and even though this had nothing to do with it, he was being used in a way by God. But they wanted to give the Jerusalem back to the Jewish people. So they fly those old old airplanes with the bi-wings. They fly it over Jerusalem, and they stop dropping leaflets on the onto the ground in Arabic, right? And these people are reading it, and it says, and the prophecy in this, and I can't remember where, it says they will recapture Jerusalem without drawing the sword, right? So this is really cool. This is how God works. So they see these leaflets that were dropped by the British Empire, right? And it says you need to surrender the city of Jerusalem back to the Jewish people, signed General Allenby. They thought it said Allah. And they surrendered the entire city without one drop of blood back to the Jewish people. So it's amazing how God works in his providence. And that's, again, that's a prophecy fulfilled. Now, if you look back in all of them, Isaiah and Jeremiah, they all talk about the regathering of the people of Israel, right? So we're just 3 years after World War II, right? The Germans have exterminated 6 million Jews, and but Bible prophecy says they will come back to their land and have their own country. So on May 14th, 1948, Prime Minister Ben-Gurion, which was his name, they gave control back to Israel of that region, which God said they would come back. So for the end times to happen, Jerusalem has to be intact. Israel has to be intact. And guess what? They're back and they're intact. It's pretty amazing. They were, and just to let you know how God, they were attacked immediately within an hour or 2 hours after that by 7 different countries. They had an army of 40,000 people. They had 10,000 guns and like 2 tanks. And they repelled 7 different countries invading Israel from every side. God does what he says and says what he does. So he protected them. He stopped that. He stopped that. Now, up to 1967, they only had half of Jerusalem, all right? The other part was called Transjordan. It was controlled by the Palestinians. 1967, it was called the Six-Day War, where the Jewish people said, this is our capital. And within that time, they took over the entire control of Jerusalem. So it was in their hands 100%. So again, it's just an amazing how these prophecies are taking place. And then I was talking to you, I think what Trump did, I don't think anybody talks about this, but he solidified when he was president that Jerusalem is now the capital of Israel, because it used to be in Tel Aviv, but they changed it, and now nationally and the whole world looks at Jerusalem as the capital of the Jewish people. So again, it's just amazing what the Lord does. And let me look at my notes just a little bit here. And so we're looking at some of the prophecies. Now there's a lot more prophecies that have rolled, but we don't have time to roll them all. But let's just look at the people of Israel itself. There's so many other nations that have existed and gone into the dust, right? These people were disbanded for over 1,900 years, right? They came back. They still had their own religion, right? They had their own traditions, the Hebrew traditions on exactly like Passover and stuff. They kept those traditions. There's so many countries that they were against that don't no longer exist. Israel was going to be known as the land of milk and honey, right? Mark Twain, or his real name was Samuel Clemens, he took a trip in the late 1800s, and it was a desolate, and he wrote about it in one, I don't know if it was his memoirs or books, and says, this is the promised land. It was just dead, nothing there. Now you go to Israel and look, that state that's the size of New Jersey has the 20th largest economy in the world. Think about that. I mean, they're major producers of so many things. You look at the Nobel Peace Prize winners, the Nobel Science, per capita, more of them are produced out of the state of Israel than any other country by far. They're just simply amazing. They've been protected by God. They've been blessed by God. And, of course, they've been disciplined by God. But that portion alone, that they actually still exist after being 1900 years, is just truly amazing. And they return to their homeland, right? But there's a lot of the ones that really didn't do them very well, the Philistines, right? The Edomites. And the Edomites were direct, just to let you know, they were direct descendants of Esau, right? And we all remember who Esau was. But all these ones that took advantage of them, the Lord says, I'm going to destroy you, and they will remember your name no more. And that, all of those, the Amalekites, right? The Hittites, the Amorites, the Philistines, all of them disappeared into history, been absorbed into other cultures, other countries. So the ones that did, when he says, I'm going to bless Israel and I'm going to curse those who curse you, he's not lying. And that includes the United States. You know, under Trump, there was a ignition of, hey, we're your friends now. But you see, again, we're starting to pull, especially under Obama, under Bush, especially under Biden, we're pulling away from Israel. And in the last days, it says every country in the world is going to go against Israel, and there's not going to be one, and that includes the United States, that's not going to stand with Israel. You see what's happening even with Iran building nuclear warheads, right? They're supposed to have 4 available within, just a couple months now. And this is just, Israel's not going to let Iran have those weapons. I think they're going to go after them. And when they go after them, I think, again, they're going to be judged as, because right now, everybody is for the Palestinians and everything going. So when they defend themselves against, Iran, a possible nuclear attack or subverting a nuclear attack, averting it, you're going to see that distance, that anti-Semitism, that anti-Jewish propaganda kick up even more. Here's another weird one. And again, it still shows the unbelief of, they already have the implements ready for the third temple, right? We had the first temple that was destroyed. Then they tried to rebuild it. Nebuchadnezzar came in and blew it apart, partially rebuilt it under Herod, and then the Romans. Well, right now, they're ready to go with the temple. And that means the Temple Mount, and I don't know how that's going to work, because the Dome of the Rock is there right now, and the Dome of the Rock is Islam. It's like the third most holy place, right? You've seen the pictures. You got the big golden dome. That's called the Dome of the Rock. That's Detroit. That's kept by the Muslims. So I don't know how that's going to happen in the end days, if there's going to be a joint temple. But also, it's kind of an affront to God that you guys, you still haven't learned your lesson. I sent my Messiah to die for you. You're still going into temple and animal sacrifice, which I told you. So even though they want to build that's not okay with the Lord, because you're trying to build a temple that you don't need anymore. I already have that temple, and his name is Jesus Christ. So there's going to be lessons learned in that one. About that, it says all the nations are going to be attacking Magog and Gog and Magog. You're going to hear about that actually twice, once during the end of the millennial reign. But Gog and Magog, I think that's probably Russia coming down. You've got the kings of the east, which most likely is going to be China, especially in those last battles. There's going to be, millions of people gathering in the Valley of Megiddo. So a lot of those ones that are here, and then Egypt's still there. And Egypt was one of those mentioned, but they have to be around in end times, because they're going to be kind of conversion of the Egyptian people towards the Lord at the end times. So it's pretty amazing. Again, we already said that there's no superpower that's going to step in to try to save Israel. We can kind of see the regathering. If you look in the book of Daniel, and he talks about the toes, right, made of iron and clay, right, and the rebuilding of the Roman Empire, the new Roman Empire. Well, that's basically going to be the 10 consolidated sections of the earth, basically, that they're trying to consolidate. Iron and clay never mixed together. There's going to be uneasy alliance with all these nations trying to come in. But Daniel, again, says there's going to be a re-amplification of the Roman Empire. You already see we have a one political world system trying to take control of our country right now, the World Health Organization. They're trying to give them power to decide what happens when we get the flu, right? This is coming around big time right now. So you have this huge political system and economic system. Again, you see where they're trying to go cashless. They're trying to get us into that one world economic system. So then, and we now have the ability, which they didn't have back then, to take the mark. They already have that going on in Sweden, by the way. They got little capsules. They put them under their skin, and they just go, boop. They scan their little wrist. We just saw one a couple days ago on the news where they're just putting their palm down. So Amazon. So you see all this stuff, and then there's a big push also for one world religious system, right? Most of them are kumbaya, always lead to God, right? There's 4,300 religions in the world. 4,299 of them are by works. There's one that is by grace and salvation alone. And so again, and they're all, now the Islam, I don't know what will happen to the Muslim nation, because they will never bow down to that one world system. So I think, I don't know what the Antichrist is going to do at that time, probably come down pretty hard on the Muslim nations. But again, we see a one world global system starting to happen. And you already see it. There's a desperation out there for a leader, right? I heard that Merkel from Germany, right, the prime minister, say, boy, we need somebody that can pull us together, a one world leader. So there's this desperation. So many things are going south right now. And there's this crying for a one world leader. And that's going to bring the rise of the Antichrist. Now we have a lot of little Antichrists like Putin and all these people, but this person that comes in, he's going to be empowered like nobody's ever been empowered from the dark side. Sounds like Star Trek. The dark side. Use the Force, Luke. Technology. Again, I can't remember. I heard this and it was astonishing. Is every 2 months, we double our knowledge. It's growing at an exponential rate. Yeah, and it's just booming. Again, we've got a lot of technology, but our wisdom is declining in ways and that's the only way. Again, the technology has to be there for what's going to happen in the end times, right? The world watching Christ come down, the mark of the beast, so many different things that are going to be happening. None of that was, it was St. Augustine, now that I remember. St. Augustine is the one that kind of started the, let's replace the church, well, for them with the Catholic Church, because they hadn't seen all these events take place, right? But now we're seeing, we have the technology. It's all just coming into focus. We look at the plagues that are starting to come upon the earth, the pestilence, right? And some of these are being generated man-made. What happened in China, the China virus. They're actually in there making viruses, thinking they can help, but when man's wisdom replaces God's wisdom, so you're seeing a lot of drought, and a lot of that could be man-made. I just heard that they were thinking about, this global green initiative, right? Now, I've read enough to know that it's more of a political thing than anything else, but they're trying to gain control. But they're trying to think about seeding like the oceans with iron to make them better, start to seed the clouds. They want to do all this again. In fact, they're playing God, and I think the stuff they're going to do is going to actually have adverse effects on, what's going on. We see our laws. We're entering a time of lawlessness in the United States. You look at New York, you look at San Francisco, you look at LA, you look at Chicago, you look at Denver now. And lawlessness, they think they're doing a good job. Again, the wisdom of these people, without God's wisdom, he calls them fools, right? And they think they can do all this stuff, and they can't. They can't. And not only with the lawlessness, we see the violence. Because violence is just, I've never seen anything like this. Just say I'm in my 60s, but yeah, that's right, hon. But I've never seen anything like we're seeing now when you turn on the news and, just being terrible to old, just throwing them. We saw one where this guy's just out joyriding, and they see this guy riding on a bike and minding his own business. They'd stole the car, they run him over, and they kill him. And it's just, so we're seeing, and I think one of the worst things that we have is the apostate church, all right? The church that we believe in is a fundamental church. We're a Bible-believing church. We believe that this is the inerrant word of God, and what he says goes. Guys, there's a lot of churches that just don't preach this word anymore. They've got false doctrines, and that's why we have 4,300 religions. And I don't know how many sects of Christianity. Now, most of them are basically based on, Christ as Lord and Savior, but they've gone along different ways. And so the church is really turned away in a lot of ways. Again, there's going to be false teachers, false Christs that arose. So all these things are just kind of telling us that, as he said in Matthew 24, the seasons. When you start seeing the leaves ripen and the fruit ripen, that we're in season. We'll never know the exact date. That's just for the Father, right? And we already mentioned the rise in anti-Semitism. You think it couldn't get much after World War II in Nazi Germany, but it's happening right back there again in Nazi Germany. It's spreading like in England, in the United States, anti-Semitism. But that's, the Lord always said they're going to be a thorn in everybody's side, right? And so you see the persecution of Jews. You're also going to see a more persecution of Christians. There's been more, I just was reading, there was more Christians that have died in the 20th century for their faith in the whole 19 centuries, and that pace is accelerating into the 21st century. And I'm not trying to tell you guys, I mean, we know what's coming, and we're going to be gone. We're going to be at the marriage supper of the Lamb when this does happen. And again, the unbelievers will just scoff at the return of Christ, you know. How long, right? It's just on and on. But the people that don't understand their Bible are not going to know what's going on. And that's why you see this sense of desperation out there, the sense of what's going on. They don't know how to handle it, you know. And that's why, again, we're light and we are, and, you know, we're going to have to take that. People say, I think you're full, you're nuts, but, oh well. That's the way it goes, right? We know where our faith is, right? So all that stuff, and again, there's a lot more, you know, stuff what's going on, but it just kind of shows that we're kind of there. Now, I don't know how long, guys. It could be, is it 10 years? Is it 20 years? Is it 30 years? And I always like to say we're all in our own end times anyway. We always get right with the Lord, whether we die a physical death, you know, we need to be ready. And I think when we get into this chapter 6, which we'll start into a little bit here, we got to understand that, you know, the Lord is in control. He's going to bring it to a close. And for all those people that are saying, God, when's the Lord going to take his vengeance? Well, it says, the vengeance is mine, say the Lord. And he's going to take it. He's going to take it. And along with that, he's going to be doing his thing. And still the calamity of the disbelief and stuff is just going to add to the total turmoil that's going to be going on the earth at that time. Well, any questions on that before we get into the seals? All righty. Well, we will read this first. Yes? Right. Right. Well, you're going to see in Revelation as we get there, and the Antichrist is going to set up. And they're going to see him turn his back, and it's going to be the abomination of desolation, just like it was, where he's going to be in the Jewish temple. And remember when Christ says, if you're on the rooftops or if you're in the field, flee. Don't go in and get your. That's the time when he's going to turn on them, because he knows his time's really short. So those people, one, they're going to realize who he is, and they're going to realize Christ, especially when they see him, because it's going to be, you know, whatever this event, and when Christ comes out, a lot of them are going to be saying, how could we have been so stubborn? He calls them stiff-necked, right? My people are so stiff-necked. All righty. So we'll get into these first seals here, and affectionately known as the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, right? So I watched the Lamb open the first of the 7 seals. Then I heard one of the 4 living creatures say in a voice like thunder, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a white horse. Its rider held a bow, and he was given a crown, and he rode out as a conqueror, bent on conquest. So again, the Lord is given the approval to open the 7 scrolls or 7 seals, and he opens the first one. So one of the 4 cherubim with a loud voice, you know, says, all right, it's time. And he opens that first scroll. So I heard a voice of the 4 living creatures say with a voice like thunder, "Come." So behold a white horse. Now, white horses are usually meant as something nice, you know, like Christ coming back. He's going to be on a white horse. But horses also can represent God's activity on earth. and they can be used as metaphors for God to accomplish his goal, okay, and his purposes. So this person's riding this white horse. And some people, again, have speculated that that's Christ, but it's not, because the context is just entirely different. This rider on the horse is going to be associated with 3 other horses, right? So, but we know that he has a crown, which again, he's going to be a ruler, right? The crown signals ruler. And this rider, he has a bow, but he doesn't have any arrows in it. So what they think that is that he's going to come in peace. And if you look at the first 3.5 years of the tribulation, he's going to get all these people together to sign the peace treaty with Israel. Everything's hunky-dory, right? So initially, he's going to come as, again, very diplomatic, very just hiding who he actually is, right? But that's going to change significantly as he starts into his reign. Because at the very last one, he says he came out to conquer and to conquer. So world domination is his goal. Again, he basically, when he says, I should have been God, God shouldn't be God, right? That's why he was kicked out. His pride was so bad that, he's saying I should be. And so really? But anyway, so that's what he is. It's going to be peaceful for about 3.5 years, and then it's going to start breaking loose. He says, when the Lamb opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, come. Then another horse came out, a fiery red one. Its rider was given power to take peace from the earth and to make men slay each other. To him was given a large sword. Okay, so we have the second ride. Of course, bright red, kind of the emblem of blood shed, right? Killing, he says he has a large sword. He's looking for somebody to give him an ice cream toward. So this writer realizes that this one is allowed to take peace from the earth and really start going. Now remember, the church has been raptured at this time for over 3.5 years, right? We're up, the presence of the Holy Spirit really preventing, and the church really holding back evil is gone, right? So this one has a massive big sword. So again, you're going to see wars starting to break out. And again, as Christ said in Matthew 24, there's going to be wars and rumors of wars, right? So it's going to start happening big time. But this is only, as Christ said, the birth pangs, right? So again, you're going to have a lot of countries start warring with other countries for whatever reasons. And you see it now. Again, look at what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. How stupid is that, right? You go, really? So they're going to take peace from the earth, and we think it's now, but these wars are going to ramp up to bigger and deadlier, and we have more sophisticated machinery, which means more death. It's going to be a real fun time. These leaders want peace, but, unless you have a heart for God and his, it just doesn't work, does it? So they're going to be, so wars are going to multiply. And again, the death toll is going to start going up. And then the third seal will be opened. So when the land opened the third seal, I heard a third living creature say, come. I looked, and there before me was a black horse. Its rider was holding a pair of scales in his hand. Then I heard what sounded like a voice among the 4 living creatures saying, a quart of wheat for a day's wages, and 3 quarts of barley for a day's wages. And do not damage the oil and the wine So, as these wars roll, what's going to happen to the earth, like what's happening just in Ukraine? Ukraine was basically the wheat belly of Europe, right? And when that war started out, all that crops and stuff couldn't be planted, couldn't be harvested. So as these wars are going to interrupt the economic system, right? And when they start doing that, what's going to come? You're going to have famine. You're going to have a lack of food. You're going to have the regular stuff that we have going, you know, the commerce, all these wonderful trucks going everywhere, Walmart, King Soopers, you know, whatever thing we need. And I don't know how that's going to affect the U.S. on that. You can already see just the inside turmoil in the United States, how it's affecting that. But the black horse, that's what it represents. And got an interesting, this is from Lamentations 4, 8, and 9, and says this. It says, now their face is blacker than soot. They are not recognized in the streets. Their skin is shriveled on their bones. It has become dry as wood. Happier were the victims of the sword than the victims of hunger, who wasted away, pierced by the lack of fruits of the field. So, whether, again, in the Lamentations, I think, who actually wrote it? I think it's not, I don't know if it's Jeremiah or it's Solomon. I don't know if Solomon wrote Lamentations or not. I'll have to look at that. But he's got a pair of scales in his hands. Back then, they used stones to counterweight the measures, right? And but look what he says in there. He says a day's wages for one loaf of bread, and then 1 for 3 barley. Now, barley's not as nutritious as wheat, but it's saying it's going to be so bad that you're literally going to have to work a day's wages for a loaf of bread, right? That's how, you know, you see the inflation rising now. Could you imagine you see, $120 for a loaf of bread, you know? But because, again, the farming supply, everything's been interrupted, that's when the famine comes in, and people just don't have enough to eat. And so it's not a good thing. We'll do the last one, and then we'll quit with the fourth horse. So again, it's just going to be a time where many people are going to just be dying from starvation. What's going on? So we open the fourth seal. I heard the voice of the fourth living creature say, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a pale horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was following close behind him. They were given power over a fourth of the earth, to be killed by the sword, famine, the plague, and the wild beasts of the earth. So let's look at that. I mean, they say we have about 7.5 to 8 billion people on the earth right now. So at that time, well, let's go back. The rapture's taken place, so let's call it, I heard this one thing that they think that authentic Christians, his population is about 600 million. So when the rapture takes place, and I assume that means all children. I really never see anything about all babies, children, younger ones that haven't been accountable. I think they're going with us because they're not at that age of accountability yet. And think about that sign right there. All of a sudden, all these children and babies, and does that make anybody start thinking? And there will be people that start thinking, hey, maybe all that stuff that I said was hogwash is true, right? But there's still some that they see all this happening, all these people gone, and they still refuse to believe in our Savior. So, and the rider's name was Death, and Hades followed him. And it's just going to be between, again, the wars and the starvation, and it's going to be just around the globe, not only the United States, but places. Now, I think the people that are going to be, at least for a while, are people that do live out and can support themselves, right? But eventually, the stuff that's going to hit, it's going to be globally. Yeah, death and Hades. Yeah, Hades is the Hebrew term of hell. Hades, death and Hades. So, like, say, when we die, our souls are going to go to one of Abraham's bosom, or our spiritual body, our physical body, is going to lay in the ground, whatever happens. But what our soul and spirit, those places are, and that's why he's saying death and Hades follows, because a lot of those people that died, guess what? They're unbelievers, and they're going to go along with the death and Hades. Now, the ones that come to Christ during that tribulation, they'll be, as we get in, you're going to see that they're crying out from under the altar, say, when you going to avenge us, right? But again, again, a fourth of the population, that's really, really hard for me to even comprehend. And I think that's why it should quicken all of our spirits to make sure that people that we know and love, and anybody, right? Man, it's time to get right with the Lord. And again, we're all in our end days, The time you're born, you're in your end days, right? And the Lord's prepared us, I think, in so many more ways than an unbeliever, that what death's all about, and it's a doorway for us. And it's a doorway for them, whether they don't realize it or not. But that place of Hades is a lot more uncomfortable than Abraham's bosom. Again, I would suggest reading Luke 16 again. I think that's a wonderful, I don't even think it's an illustration. And this is my own personal opinion. The one about the poor man and the rich man, right? The poor man's eating the scraps. The dogs are licking his wound. He goes to Abraham's bosom, right? He doesn't name the rich man. And the rich man goes to Hades. And he sees Father Abraham up there, and he's in pain and toil. But the reason I don't think that's, and this is my own personal opinion, you can disagree. God doesn't do anything without a purpose. Christ does. He names that guy as Lazarus, right? Lazarus was carried away. So in my own personal opinion, I think his name is written in the book of life. Lazarus right there. That rich man's name, whoever he was, he doesn't even mention him. His name's not written in the book of life. And that's where he's trying to ask hey, can I just touch and get a drink of water to touch my lips? And then can I warn my brothers, and I can't remember, brothers and sons? And Christ makes it so clear at that time. He says that chasm, once it's there, it cannot be crossed. And what he's saying is, if you don't make that decision on this earth, there's nothing you can do. He's given you every chance, every day of your life. And again, people say it's a parable, and you're more than welcome. But I think when Christ says, because none of the other parables, this is the parable of the seed. This is the parable. But this one, he goes, there was a man named Lazarus. He says there was a name. He doesn't just say, oh, let's call him Lazarus. His name is Lazarus. He died. He went to Abraham's bosom. The rich man had all the stuff on the earth. And then what's he tell him at the end? He says, I gave you the prophets. You didn't listen to the prophets. And then he says, even if somebody came back from the dead and told you wouldn't believe it. At that time, I think he's talking about himself. I'm going to come back from the dead, and you're still not going to believe it. So there's just people that really have hard hearts. And, your heart goes out for them. You go, man, if you knew what was coming. But we'll call it right there. Any questions on any of that? Bobby, you said you listened to John Hancock.